What happens when chasing 35 rugged mountain peaks becomes a 6-year journey of resilience, transformation, and unexpected inspiration? My guest, Rodney Carpentier, shares how his quest to conquer the Catskills 3500 intertwined with a career in law enforcement, personal challenges, and the creation of his mystery novel set in those very peaks. This is a story of grit, adventure, and finding your next chapter. Let's go. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. Jake. I'm your host, Jake Bushman. And before we dive in, don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast. Subscribe to the show so you never miss an adventure. And check out my YouTube channel where you can watch many of these conversations unfold. Journey with Jake is also proud to be part of the Podmatch Podcast Network. Today's guest, Rodney Carpentier, spent 6 years completing the rugged Catskills 3500 Challenge, an adventure that tested his limits and inspired his debut mystery novel, set right in those same peaks. With a background in law enforcement and a passion for storytelling, Rodney's journey is one of resilience, creativity, and a connection to the wild. If you enjoyed this episode, you'll also love episode 139 with fiction author Rhonda Parker Taylor, where we explore her journey and creative process. Let's get to my conversation with Rodney Carpentier. All right. I'm excited today. I've got Rodney Carpentier on the call with me. I said it. Yes, I said it right. I'm always butchering people's names, so it's nice when I get it correct. So thanks, Rodney. Thanks for coming on Journey with Jake.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is fun for me. I love getting to talk to different people who do adventurous things. You did the Catskills 3500. We're going to talk about what that is and what's all involved with that. Before we do that, I do want to know a little bit about Rodney, where you're from, where you grew up, that sort of thing. So give us just a little background on who Rodney is.
All right. So I was born and grew up in the capital region of New York State, which is right along the Hudson River, right outside of Albany. Got married very young at the ripe old age of 22. I lived in California for a year. During that time is when I started getting my interest in law enforcement. Escaped LA after a year, almost to the day. Came back, started taking tests, started my law enforcement career in 2006. Then we slowly moved south and east over the next 18, 19 years or so, to the point where we got to the Hudson River right at the Tappan Zee Bridge in Rockland County, New York, about 30 miles north of New York City. Started growing our family. We grew to have at tops 3 dogs, 2 beagles, and our foster fail. We have an 11-year-old daughter, and we're about to hit our 20. Actually, if you say this is going to air in September, we'll have crossed the 21-year anniversary mark at that point. And over the last 2.5 years, I've taken an interest towards writing and released my debut novel. And as of the release of this podcast, it sounds like my second book will be out by then also.
That's awesome. Amazing. I like how you talked about escaping LA.
Yes. Not my place.
So you're from upstate New York.
Correct.
LA, was it school? Like, what was it that took you to LA?
So my wife and I both went to college at the State University of New York at New Paltz, which is basically halfway between where we live now in Rockland County, where we're from in Albany County. She's a year older than me, so she left after graduation to start grad school in LA. She originally wanted to go into like voice acting, then got out of that, got into communications, and went to looked at all the big schools, UCLA, and trying to think of, trying to think of all the big schools out there. So she went around and she looked at
UCLA,
USC. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of USC. But she ended up at Cal State LA, which is a little bit outside the city. And so she did it. She lived there for a year. Like came back. That's when we got married. And so she still had another year of grad school to go. And I had nothing. I had no idea what the heck I was going to do. There had been a plan to go become a lawyer at one point and kind of abandoned that because again I was rushing into the marriage thing, and instead of getting myself set up, I was like, you know what, let's set up this marriage and this relationship, and we'll figure stuff out from there. And when I got out there to start working, and I had, it was 2004, I had my 4-year college degree, and I'm like, people are going to be tripping over themselves to hire me. Back then, the myth was you go to college, you're going to get that great
Exactly.
job, and here, pay more, do this, do that. Hey, you want to go to grad school? Let's do this. And I got out there. My first job I got was $10 an hour. I worked as basically a receptionist. The company was great. I just didn't get the California vibe of how they did stuff. They were an owner builder, and they owned a bunch of properties, and they had tenants. So I was dealing with the tenants, but they also did construction, and they were developing some of the properties. So I had to also worry about getting a lot of the vendors and stuff for it. And I just, after a while, I was like, this isn't me. They gave me a raise. They treated me very well. And then I left them in the lurch. It was a terrible, terrible part of my kind of my work history. And then my wife had been working because, she needed to work also, working for a company that did installation of low voltage stuff, cameras.
Okay.
Plasmas were huge at the time. TiVos were huge at the time. So I didn't have any background in that, but the company was small. So she was kind of doing the office thing, and the owner, and he had a young man that worked for him. It was very talented at this stuff. And basically my job was to drive the van around LA, which is probably another reason why I didn't like it so much, just sitting in traffic. And so I did that for a couple months. Then the owner of the company was a pretty extreme dude, and he got angry one day, and I got angry one day, and I told him where he could stick his job. And again, it was a lot of immaturity. It was very young man making very silly mistakes with your career. And, fortunately, I survived all that. But in the meantime, that's when I started getting interested in law enforcement, because the only job that paid out there, they had a huge banner over Hollywood Boulevard, because we lived between Hollywood and Sunset down by Franklin. If you ever look on Google Maps, it's kind of outside of like the touristy area, but walking distance to the touristy area, because you certainly weren't driving. But they had a huge banner over the roadway that said, hey, join the LAPD. Starting salary was like $52,000. And that was a lot of money back then, especially for somebody who was working for $10 an hour.
Sure.
So I started the process, and, it was kind of like, hey, I need a job. But at the same time, I started looking into the career. I found a couple of like memoir type books of police officers, and talking about the job and talking about the career. And I'm like, okay, I think I can do this. I think I can do this. I think I can do this. Uh, and then again, I dropped out of the LAPD process. But when I got back to New York, it was like, okay, civil service kind of ran in our families. My mom worked for New York State for, in the end, it was like 37 years. My father-in-law worked for the New York State Senate for, I don't know, 40 some odd years. And my mother-in-law had a county job for about a decade or 15 years or so. So I came from a civil service family. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll do that. And it kind of worked out. My wife got her master's degree with a 4.0, because she's a nerd like that. And then she started working in New York City, which is, how everything kind of came together. I passed the state corrections test, which back then you were moving south anyway, because that's where the openings were for personnel. So we were moving that direction. Plus, she was starting to work in New York City and having to commute every day, because this is before work at home. And again, we slowly moved south and east until we got to the Tappan Zee Bridge, and we're kind of like, okay, we're comfortable here. And then after work from home and COVID and spending all this time in the Catskills, which we'll get to, we were like, no, we think we want to move back upstate, move up to the mountains, and have a much simpler life post law enforcement career, which, is a 20-year commitment here in New York State. So I have about 3 years left.
So you're in the middle of it right now. You're in law enforcement right now.
Oh yeah. Yep. Recently got promoted to the rank of lieutenant. After spending just shy of 10 years as a patrol sergeant, working all 3 shifts, doing all that stuff. Prior to that, I was an investigator, and I worked the road. I actually worked the road as a deputy sheriff, as a regular guy, for a very short amount of time. Actually, I've had a very good career. But you always have the ups and downs, and you have the tough times. But I've had a very good career also.
In college, did you study criminal justice or did you study something else?
I was an English major. I did
Okay.
100% into literature. I was always interested in reading and writing. And back then, when I wanted to write, I wanted to be Ernest Hemingway or William Faulkner. And I learned very quickly when I tried to write like them that I wasn't them. And, it took another, 15, 16 years to kind of say, all right, what is my voice? And again, if we're going to get into that, 2022 is when I decided, all right, I'm going to be a mystery writer and I need to learn how to write mysteries. So, so basically I took these wild ideas I had and just dropped a dead body into them.
I love, plus your background as in law enforcement. I mean, that's got to be a huge help to writing mysteries, I would think.
It is. I mean, I've never had a mystery. So like, oh, I don't know who did it. A
Yeah,
lot of
yeah.
law enforcement honestly is, all right, I have a crime. I have a suspect, and that suspect, and that's based on, evidence, and that's based on facts, and that's based on probable cause. And it's really kind of building that probable cause so that you can make the arrest. And then, the criminal justice system is then, okay, now we need to get to beyond a reasonable doubt. So, and again, this is one of the reasons that I didn't want to be on the lawyer side of things, where I was trying to work the deals, because I've had so many cases that I worked on for months. A couple of them I worked on for years to bring, to arrest folks, and in the end they got probation, or they got a slap on the wrist, and it was, oh, just pay the restitution for the $50,000 fraud that you committed, and it was just, so it was kind of like, I don't mind doing all the work and someone else making that deal. I didn't want to be the guy that made those deals. That wasn't what I was
Gotcha.
interested in. So so get back to the root of your question, so I was studying English, wanted to be a lawyer. I did take some legal classes back then, but no, my background, while I ended up interested in law enforcement, I've never taken a single criminal justice course in my career.
I love it. It's amazing. I always joke with people too, because I was a hotel restaurant management major, and I
Mhm.
haven't worked for a hotel or restaurant. I've worked like at them. I'm been in trade shows, conventions, but I've never like worked for a restaurant or for a hotel. So kind of similar. Also, you got another similarity. I was also young when I got married as 21, so I think I beat you by just a little bit. Hey,
Yep.
26 years later, and here I am. So you
Yeah.
21 years later, which is awesome. Congratulations. That's
Thank you.
fantastic. All right, I want to jump into the Catskills.
Absolutely.
First of all, tell me what the Catskills 3500 is, and then what drew you to this? Why did you want to do this?
All right. So the Catskill 3500s, Catskill Mountains are a collection of mountains that go over 3 or 4 counties on the western side of the Hudson River, primarily in Greene and Ulster County, but also kind of stretch into Sullivan and Delaware County. And they are far flung throughout. They are trailed, they are untrailed, and completely, compass, or you're at the mercy of a herd path, which is, always fun, because that's like a maze at sometimes. Um, so the basic premise is the 3500 Club is a group of people who have traversed and climbed all 35 of those mountains any season, and then 4 of them specifically you have to do again in the winter, which is the legal definition of winter, December 21st through March 21st ish.
Okay.
And you have to do them in the winter. And basically, it's kind of like Pokemon. You just got to collect them all. The trailed ones, they kind of, they'll go, they'll kind of give you the honor system of, okay, that's a trailed, you probably did that. We don't, they don't check that necessarily. Although they do have this, because they're state run, they do have inns at the trailhead. So, you don't come back out. It's kind of, hey, maybe we'll look for those people. But the untrailed ones, they actually at the summit have canisters where you kind of got to find them, which is one of the most frustrating parts of those. But you find them, and they just have this little flip notebook in there, and you write your names and the date you were there, and you put it in there. It's kind of your proof of life that, hey, I was here, I did this. With COVID, so legally we've completed the 3500s, but not, or technically, per their new definition, but we technically still haven't done 2 of them. 2 of the mountains are actually on private land, or at least the trails to get them are on private land.
Interesting.
With COVID, because so many people, especially, New York City folks and everything, were coming up to the mountains because, couldn't really stay inside, wanted to get out, didn't have the restrictions of work and stuff, started basically invading parts of the Catskills. So, and they were constantly contacting the people who own this property. They have a caretaker there, and it just got overwhelming. Number one, and then you also had people that are just like, "F it, I'm going," and were trespassing. So they were like, nope,
Geez.
we're
Okay.
done. We're done. So
Cutting us off.
yeah. So, I would like to make the argument, and we haven't really interacted with the group in a while, but I would like to make the argument like, hey, if you've done the other 33, you've made that investment, you finished that. The club can put together like a group of people who are at that point, work with the caretaker, go with a trusted guide, a trusted person, and then you can go to those two because they're very close together. You could do both of them in a single day, and then you actually done all 35. So I'm waiting to see if that option opens up. Oh, so that's what the 3500s are. We got involved. This was an idea of my wife's. Started hiking up in the Catskills about 2015, 2016. We started going up and doing just random trails. We didn't really know what we were doing. We didn't have equipment. I wasn't, prepared physically or mentally to do these climbs. My first couple of hikes I did in my patrol boots because I didn't have hiking boots or anything like that. We didn't have packs. We carried way too much crap, and it was a slog. We did a long weekend up at state campground called North South Lake, and that was kind of our introduction into longer hiking. We did a good portion of what they call the escarpment trail, which is just basically on the edge of the world, and you're looking down in the Hudson Valley. You can see the river in the distance. It was October, so it's just oranges and yellows and reds and all these wonderful. It was beautiful, and you just kind of fell in love with it. Oh, then my wife reads about the 3500s, and she's like, "Hey, why don't we try to do this?" And it was at the time it was three of us. It was my wife and I and her boss, who was an older gentleman, but he was hanging out a lot with the family. So we started this as a group. So the first year we did it, we did two, and I was miserable the entire time. They were way ahead of me. I felt I died on some of these mountains, and we were supposed to continue on and do a third one, but I rebelled and said, no, we need to get out of here because it was October, but it wasn't beautiful October anymore. Now it was rainy and foggy and cold and miserable, and again, still wearing, combat boots, for the lack of a better word for it, just uncomfortable. So we did two in the fall. Next spring, we decided to do a trip. We did four on that weekend. We started kind of turning it into, we do a spring run, we do a fall run. And we started doing, trying to expand, we did two, then four, then eight. And we started getting faster. We started doing more research. We started getting the right equipment. And again, these are all, for the most part, the trailed ones. And there's a lot of them that you can do. And you can do multiples in a day because they're all connected. You go up one, you go down, you go up another. So we made that pretty easy. So we kind of hit the low hanging fruit, the easy ones. Then we started trying to hit some more of the difficult ones. Like there's a trail called the Devil's Path, which traverses, was it 4 on the front end? Then it goes into a cull. And then you cross over the road, and then you climb up to the top of one of them, which is one of the nastiest climbs, allegedly, because I've actually never done it, but you just stick bottom of the mountain. You got to climb
Straight up.
3,700 feet straight up. And yeah, so we actually did that mountain a different way because that one had multiple approaches because it's actually also a ski mountain. It's called Hunter. So Hunter Ski Mountain. So there was a snowmobile path we could take, which was a little bit better. And yeah, then the second half of the Devil's Path, I think has only two of the mountains, but again, there's some of the bigger ones, and then there's one that is like 3,478 feet. So it's not 3,500, but it pretty much is. I'm like, what the heck?
Close enough.
And again, we did that hike. We didn't even realize that we were doing it until we're doing the thing, and we're like, is this the mountain? And then my wife looks at the we had because we had the electronic maps, we had the physical maps, and she goes, no, this is called St. Anne's Peak. And we're like, oh, we had so many nasty, inappropriate names for that freaking mountain. Because we're like, it doesn't count, but we have to climb over it. So this is a pain in the butt. So, and then, then we started doing some of the more untrailed ones. We started doing one-offs like, oh, hey, we're going to be up in the summer for around 4th of July at my in-laws. Hey, let's run out and go do that mountain, because there's a couple that are just like off by themselves.
Gotcha.
And it's like, you're not going to do them in combination or anything else. So it's so we'd have one-offs, or we'd break up some of the trails and do 2 one day, 2 the next day. And, on a long weekend like Columbus Day weekend or Memorial Day weekend, we would do. So go out a Friday, we do a bunch on Saturday, do a bunch on Sunday, and then do like a one-off on the extra Monday because we needed to head home after that. So yeah, it took us a while. We lost. He dropped out. We didn't lose him. My wife's boss ended up not wanting to continue after a while, and so we kind of dropped him from it. We gave him opportunities because we didn't want to get too far ahead. But after a while, I was like, we started going up to the Catskills in the winter, like our Christmas break, for lack of a better word. Um, Instead of going and traveling somewhere, we'd go up and we'd stay at a bed and breakfast and we'd relax and we'd hit a couple mountains, and we took care of a couple of the winter hikes in 2020, right before COVID became a serious thing. We did our last two winter hikes during that, and so at that point, I think we had like two or three left. And that fall, we finished all but one. They were untrailed, and the only way to get to the untrailed ones is you had to climb a trailed one and then find the herd path to go out to the one and then from there out to the last one. And we got so lost in the fall that it was starting to get dark, so we went over the mountain's called Pikamoose. We went over that, and then we had to go out to the mountain called Lone, and we got so lost and so turned around. And to this day I have no idea how, because my wife is very map savvy, and I was always just like, I'll follow you, you're going to be leading anyway, because I can't keep up with her. But we got so turned around, so lost with that we eventually made it to Lone. But by the time we got out there, signed that canister, it was like we don't even want to try to do the last mountain, which was called Rocky. And so we left that fall with one mountain left to go. So in 2021, I guess it was. Yeah, I think we finished in 21. We went out to that. We had to climb Pikamoose again. We had to go all the way out to Lone, but we had that one down at this point. And then we had to make it to Rocky. And it was May, but it was cold. It was rainy. We were miserable, but we had been training with our compass. And we got turned around again, and we're trying to follow the electronic map and trying to find the herd path and everything. And finally, we're just like, screw it. How did we figure out how to do this? So my wife got our bearings, and she set that compass. And we scratched and everything because it was completely untrailed. So the twigs and all the stuff is just scratching in the face. We had goggles on, and they're fogging up, and we can't see anything. And we just followed that compass, and it led us right to the canister. Obviously for people who orienteer all the time, it's like, well, duh. But for us, it was like magic. It was like,
Sure.
unlocking that thing. We walked right to the canister, and then it was like, all right, now it was like the end of an action movie. Like, hey, we defeated this. Now what is the quickest way to heck out of here? And so we actually basically went straight down the mountain. There was a body of water, like a creek, that was running down the mountain. We just went straight down the mountain to the creek and followed that creek out. We were already soaked anyway, so it didn't really matter, because we didn't want to go back over those other two mountains.
Sure.
We're like, no, let's just get the hell out of here. So, and then we had a well-deserved massive steak dinner,
Good for you.
and celebrated that. And the next year's when we started. About a year and a half later, we started looking for, and that's when we've actually found the property that we purchased up in the mountains. And we really haven't hiked that all that much since.
But you're up there. You got a place up there, which
We
is
got a
nice.
place up there, and yes, we're eventually going to start hiking again. We promise each other that.
Okay, so by my count, it looks like it took you about 6 years then, roughly a little over 6 years, maybe 6 years.
Yeah, about
Okay.
6 years or so.
About 6 years to do this. And I love, because like you said, the first two that you did, terrible. You're in your combat boots. You're not feeling good. But I like, you kind of got momentum. It seems like you kind of got better and better, and you figured things out and you started getting better. What was that like for you?
Well, it was funny because we were big campers.
Okay.
And we started out in tents. And at a certain point, we actually bought a small fiberglass camper and started taking that out. And now we've moved up to kind of more of the family camper. It's a little bit bigger fiberglass camper. But we had to actually start differentiating between camping and hiking. So camping was, we were going to go out, we were going to set up the camper. We did things around the campground, went to the lake, and we had campfires, and we doing that. But if we were just hiking. We would set up the camper. We would have our snacks and stuff, but we stopped cooking at the campsite because it took too much time away. When we originally were going, my wife would wake up and she was great. She'd cook us, egg sandwiches and stuff like that we could take on the trail. And then we would be out all day and then we would come back and she would make dinner. And it was just, it was, again, appreciate the heck out of that because that takes a lot of work, especially when she's tired also. But we started, there's so many cool little towns up there. And when we get to talking about some of the fiction, a lot of these towns were really interesting because they're built around skiing, they're built around hiking, are built around these people coming in. So we stay in these campgrounds, but on our way back, we'd be like, hey, let's stop in Phoenicia. Let's get a beer on our way back, celebratory beer. So we would stop and before we'd have a drink or two. And then it's like, oh, well, let's get some food while we're here. And so, it got to the point where towards the end, or towards the middle of it, we started, we would hike all day and then we would come out, we'd have dinner and stuff before we went back to the campground. And then we'd hang out the camp and, have a nice fire, have s'mores, or we started drinking heavy drinking some Fireball or doing some tequila shots, try to take away some of that pain. But, we started doing that. And then, like I said, towards the very end, when it was just my wife and I, we were staying at bed and breakfasts up in the mountains, and we met a lot of really cool people doing that. Especially in the winter. We weren't camping in the winters. We found a great place that we went back to multiple times, and we'd have the breakfast there. But again, we were still going out to dinner after we were done. It kind of so it's sort of up. And the thing is a lot of the times we would plan. I'll give you a specific. There was these mountains we read about, and my wife read about. I can't remember all their names, so I'm not going to quote all the names, but it was an untrailed mountain that led to I think one or two more. And it was after you kind of got to the top of the first one, you could get to the next two pretty easily. And these were kind of the back end of the last ones we did, the Lone and Rocky. They're part of a series of mountains called the Never Sink Nine. So, but I can't remember what these were. And so we went out early and we were expecting a slog. We thought it was going to take us a lot longer than we did. And to our credit, we did get lost for a little bit. We got turned around. But then once we started getting up, we got to the top of the first mountain pretty quick, went out to the second one, no problems, got out to the third, and we came back and we got done. We left, I think we got on the trail a little before 8:30. We got out there and we were done at like 1 o'clock. We did 3 of these mountains at 1 o'clock. It was like, what are we doing with the rest of our day? Like we were so quick. So we went and had lunch, we had a beer, and so, yeah. So again, it was a slog at first, but once we were kind of in shape and kind of expecting things, and I was a lot more mentally prepared
Huh?
for it. And, like, okay, I've done this before. I'm going to, it's going to be tough for a while, but we'll get there and it's going to be worth it. And we just got so quick at these things. Even the last mountain, like I said, we technically climbed 3 3500s that day and we were still done and back. We didn't get a super early start. We got a decent early start that day, but we were back in time to take a nap before we went out to dinner, take a shower and take a nap before we went out to dinner. So we got pretty good. We're a lot slower now, but we started getting pretty good at it.
I love it too because you have like little traditions and things like, hey,
Oh yeah.
we're gonna go get a beer. We're gonna go to these quaint towns and have dinner and a beer, and you have something to look forward to. That's part of the fun of just even travel in general. But
Yeah.
doing, when you accomplish these hikes, I think that's a cool way to kind of, hey, let's go have a beer and celebrate and enjoy dinner together.
We got to celebrate the wins in life.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, and I want to read something because I know when we talked, and I always have people fill out a little form, kind of, just what are some of the things we want to hit on. You did mention that during these 6 years of doing the Catskills 3500, that and I'll kind of quote what you said, you navigated some professional setbacks, some marital challenges, and even the loss of loved ones. So my question to you is, how did hiking and being in the Catskills help you process these things, or what kind of things were going on for you during this time?
So, basically the entire challenge of the 3500s were kind of bookended by my mom passed away in 2016 when we were starting. We only had a couple on our belt. She passed away in 2016, and then my father died in 2022, about a year after we finished. So so you have that. And then, my wife and I kind of hit a mid-marriage crisis, a lot of other things going on, stresses of because we waited about 10 years to have our daughter. So, while we were married, we were still focused on our professional lives and all that stuff. And now we have a child, and that kind of just threw off our relationship because it kind of changed the dynamics of things, and we needed to work through that. And then professionally, I made sergeant in 2015, and I spent about 9 months or so on the day shift, which was fine. I was working Monday through Friday, then started having to work part of the weekend. And then mid part of 2016, right before my mom got ill, I went to midnights, and I kind of volunteered for it because somebody had to do it. I was one of the junior guys. So I said, all right, hey, I'll jump on the grenade. I'll take one for the team. I'll do this. And I was taken as a professional challenge because the guys who were assigned to midnights were a little less desirable for the agency, or guys that had some professional difficulties themselves. So that's why they were there. They're kind of buried and hidden, and nobody wanted to see them. So I was going to take these guys and I was going to try to develop this team. And that was a lot more challenging than I expected. And I got stuck on midnights for about 3.5 years. And, that was about probably 2.5 years more than I wanted to be there. Again, I went through the loss, because so all that's happening. And then literally right before COVID, I finally got moved off of midnights to the afternoon shift, which again, that's all presents challenges too, because people's lives occur in the after work hours. And those were when I was working. So my daughter started going to school and started getting involved in things. And so for me to be involved, I had to take time off from work. So it was kind of slowing that down, and just the politics of the office and the politics of law enforcement in general. I started kind of having more and more professional setbacks, getting written up for a couple of silly little things. And as I kind of grew in seniority, I was looked to be more of the kind of the leader of leaders as the most senior sergeant on the shift. And that had its own challenges, and I had a lot of expectations on that. So that pressure started getting to me, and I really wanted to get off afternoons. I spent another 3.5, 4 years on afternoons. Really wanted to so it was just, it's completely opposite what my family was doing. And I felt that distance. Um, so again, we finished that in 21. My father passed away in 22. And later that year, we had an election, and the old administration was out, new administration was in, and that was kind of when things turned around for me. Because the new administration were basically a bunch of folks that I'd come up with. One of our retired captains was elected sheriff, and I knew him. He was a sergeant when I started, and while I never had a great personal relationship, and we weren't best friends or anything like that, he didn't have any problems with me either. He supervised me multiple times. I could talk to him, and he started promoting a lot of people who were friends of mine growing up. A lot of my early supervisors started rising through the ranks. My academy partner became a lieutenant, so he leaned on me a little bit more because we had that personal trust. A woman who had started just after us, she had transferred from the NYPD. She had a great career, and she started moving up. So now she's our chief, and she's a big fan of mine because we were always close, and I always supported her, was supportive of her, and worked well with her. So now that kind of came back on, kind of paid it forward, and kind of had that rocky bit for a little bit. And now, like I said, I just got promoted to lieutenant. My career's kind of going in a completely different direction now. And right in the middle was that whole time of climbing the mountains and stuff. It was kind of the only thing I looked forward to.
I was going to ask you, I kind of want to know what that relationship was like with the Catskills when things are rough for you professionally and whatever. You had the Catskills to kind of keep you going, it sounded like.
Yeah. We look forward to those trips. Look forward to actually, because that was quality time I could spend with my wife, and we were, out in the mountains, and we didn't really talk. Again, she was always so far ahead of me, but that sense of accomplishment together was really good. We did a couple other crazy things on our anniversaries. We did, in what year was that? That might have been 21 also. There's a escarpment trail that goes from basically one side of the Catskills to the other, kind of along this escarpment that guy was explaining, kind of overlooks the Hudson Valley. 24 miles. Most people, do it in multiple days, and they camp out and stuff. We did it in a solid 14 and a half hours,
Wow.
doing a bunch of those 3500s again also, by the way. But that was tough, but we accomplished that. And again, you talk about so that was kind of the other bookend of stuff was that was the that was for our anniversary. That was the last anniversary my father was alive for, in 21. And he he apparently had a deep connection to the Catskills also. We never really talked about it all that much. We took a faded ride around up there one time, and a lot of this stuff I built into my fiction. He used to go up there. My grandfather was a prolific hunter, and so when he was a kid, he used to go up and hunt with his dad, and that's where he courted my mom, and that's where he kind of grew up. His formative years were up there, so he had a lot of friends up there. And so we kind of drove around up there, and he had a steakhouse he really liked up there. And when he knew we were going up for our anniversary, we were staying in the mountains, we were going to go on this hike. He said, "Tell me what day you're going out to dinner, boy." Because that's how he talked to me. He's like, "Let me know where you're going." I'm like, "All right, Dad, sure." And so we went to dinner, and when it came time for the bill, they're like, "No, somebody took care of it." I'm like, "Who?" And you go, "Somebody called and gave us a credit card and said to take care of you guys, whatever you wanted." And we're like, so, you got to have that angry phone call with your dad. And like, "Listen, Dad, we both have good courage. We can buy our own dinner." He goes, "No, I wanted to do that for you, boy." That was kind of that thing. And then the other end of the bookend, if you go back to 2016, when the day we found out my mom had cancer, she had liver cancer. It was very aggressive. The call came in from my sister from the hospital while we were hiking. We were basically getting to the top of this mountain, and I got the call, and she said, "You need to come up to the hospital." And it was kind of, so again, a lot of very interesting bookends for that entire time.
Yeah, you had things happen to you while you were there. So those Catskills mean a lot to you then, just because of things that have happened there and your fiction. I mean, I think your whole it's set in the Catskills, right? Your first novel that
Yes.
you wrote.
Yep.
Yeah, let's talk about this. How did you get the idea of wanting to be a writer, and what
So,
sparked this?
so again, literature major, wanting to be, these, prolific writers, and just wasn't going to be that guy. But I always had ideas. I grew up with a lot of imagination, creating characters, creating all these different situations. I wrote some of them down. I have a novel I've been working on since college that now that I determined that I'm just going to drop a dead body into it, I may actually get that done once I'm done with the trilogy. So again, at the end of all this, my father passed away in April of 2022, and about a month later, I actually right before a hiking trip, we were going to go do we were going to do the whole Devil's Path in a weekend. We were going to do half of it. There's a campground in the middle, and then we were going to do the second half. So in order to do that, I did a swap. So I worked my afternoon shift, or what we call the sea line, and then I stayed for the overnight shift. So it wasn't the first time I did it, but I'm getting old now too. I don't bounce back like I used to. So this was a day in May, and so it's about 2 o'clock in the morning, and nothing's happening. We don't use the Q word in law enforcement because you never know where that goes. You don't try to jinx yourself. We don't ever say quiet. But it was rather uneventful. It was a Friday morning. Radio was dead. The couple people I had working were out about doing things and staying out of trouble, which was great. And I'm sitting at my desk, and I'm doing one of these, and I'm like, and for some reason this idea just raced through my head, and the log line that came through my head was, what if you grew up knowing you were adopted your whole life, and you had great life, your adoptive parents were fabulous, you got married young, you had your own, your married life was great, you had kids, you kind of built this entire identity around yourself, and then you finally want to know about your real past. So you do one of those DNA tests. And at the time I was listening to a lot of true crime podcasts to get through my day. So I read about the different situations where people would do DNA tests, and it would help lead law enforcement to identifying suspects, like they did with the Golden State Killer and things like that. So I was, that was top of mind also. But I said, what if you found out, though, when you did this DNA test, that your mother was the unidentified cold case murder victim, that they had no idea who committed the crime, and it was far flung, from, it was completely different. Like maybe you lived in California, because I had experience out there, and then you find out this small Catskill town was where your mother's body was found 40 years before. And what would that do to you? What would go through your mind with that? And so I just kind of had this idea. And so I start, I'm like, okay, hey, this is going to at least wake me up because now I got a fresh thought. I got something, you know. And again, this is before the current administration, so this was on old administration time. So I don't do this anymore. I don't write while I'm working. Not that I have time to, but you know. So I started developing this idea. Got just a blank 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, printer paper, and I just started kind of sketching out who these characters were and some old habits that I used to have kind of came out where I was like, okay, well, I need to write like a scene. I need to write something and kind of just develop who these people are. And it went from that log line to, well, what if you were a young police officer at the same time? Maybe you didn't have the greatest relationship with your dad. He had been the police chief. And when he was young in his career, he was the one who found that body. So now I have these two characters that I'm kind of parallel back and forth. When I first started writing, it was dual. It was the one character, it was the female character in California and the cop character in New York, and they were gonna, kind of collision course and kind of meet in the middle.
Yeah.
So that was the original idea, and then I just kind of scrapped that and just focused on the rookie police officer. His name is Mike, and we're just following him through the story. And again, the mountains were top of mind, so I was like, where better place to do this than the Catskills? What better town than the town of Hunter, where we spent a lot of our time? And my wife had been obsessed with going to this very specific location. And every time we went to go do it, something would happen. It would rain, or we were with my daughter, and she used to be very anti-hiking, but she was obsessed with going to it. It's called the Palinville Overlook. So finally, right around that time, I think we had gone out there. So Overlook was in the top of my mind. I'm like, maybe I can turn this into something. I kind of used it as a generic thing. Developed that not only is there the cold case murder, magically 40 years later, there's also a modern day case that seems to have very similar elements. And that's kind of where the whole thing kind of wrapped up. And all these things kind of came together, so I have the parental things, like a lot of the foster home and being adopted things come from my mom. My mom was in the Catholic foster care system when she was a kid.
Okay.
Excuse me. Came from medium size Irish family. It was only 8. Um, and they all kind of experienced that system. So that was kind of part of it. But then Mike's dad was also, Mike's dad in the book also came up to the mountains hunting with his father. So, yeah, a lot of that with my dad, so I had a lot of
Yeah.
this parental stuff that was going
Yeah. A
on at
lot
the
of
same time.
parallels kind of
Yeah.
things.
And then
Stuff that you
again,
could take. I like
yeah.
that.
And then the Catskills were the perfect backdrop, the perfect setting for all this. And then as I started kind of filling out the characters, what I did was I'm like, I need an investigative character. So I started looking around the office, and I'm like, well, there's that guy over there. He's kind of weird and kind of interesting, but also so is that guy over there. So I started kind of putting these guys together. Like, there's a state police investigator that gets involved in the case. His name's Felix. And he is a combination of about 3 or 4 different guys I worked with. He's a snappy dresser. We had an investigator that would wear literally a 3-piece suit. He had, all matching. I mean, he was so fancy. And so this character dresses like him, but he also has the attitude of a couple other different investigators I've worked with over the years. And he has a name of a friend of mine who passed away early on. So I kind of wanted to build all that together. Then Mike's best friend and kind of somewhat mentor on the force is this older fella. He's based almost completely on my partner from when I was still on patrol working midnights. And, he uses a lot of the, he used to call me little brother. And he was a big, he was a kind of a steadying force in my early career. So I needed a character as kind of be an anchor. Then I needed the I wouldn't say hot shot, but just there's so many guys I work with are either former military or military adjacent, and they're just so precise and so sharp with what they do in their career, and they are, I wouldn't say necessarily a moral, but I needed a moral compass, but I wanted somebody that kind of embodied that moral compass. And this guy is basically obsessed with making sure the creases on his sleeves are 100% perfect. So I needed a character like that. So I just started building all these cop characters around people I knew. And then when I needed antagonists, I had plenty of people that needed
That filled that role.
to fill that role too. And I just kind
Yeah.
of, I built them together, and probably should have changed a couple more names, but you know, but they're coming around because, even though these guys are antagonists in the story and are antagonists in my career, and I kind of did it as a joke originally, they're still honorable people for the most part. So I can't really say it's, all negative.
Yeah.
Nothing's that simple
What's
in
been the
life.
what's been the reaction to, especially a lot of the local people and people who kind of know that you kind of took bits and pieces of them? What's been the reaction from everybody?
So I haven't had a ton of reaction from people up in the mountains. I
Mhm.
did early on. I did an event at the community center in Wyndham, where I had a couple of local people come in. It was kind of a weird December day, so I didn't have a huge turnout, but I had enough. I had a couple of friends come and support me, along with my family. But then, probably 5 or 6 locals kind of were just like, hey, I got nothing better to do. Let's go see what this kid's got to talk about. So I did a whole presentation talking about how I wrote the story and came up with it, building the parallels of my career. So, so I did this whole author talk. And then at the end, I did a reading where I read the scene where Mike responds to and finds the dead body. And part of that is he's on one end of the town and he has to go to the other end of the town. So part of the description is him having to wind down this main road in order to get there. And he's going to the foot of the Overlook Trail. So he actually has to wind down an area called Catskill Falls. And it is hairpin. I think hairpin would not quite describe it. I don't know a more extreme word, but it goes one way. And then it's almost switchbacks, like one on top of each other, but you're driving. So, and again, and he's trying to drive a police car as fast as he can because he's a rookie and doesn't understand that, you can take your time. So, but the one of the locals was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And then of course he has to Paul, he's like, technically that wouldn't be the town of Hunter. I said, yes, I know, but for the lack of, bear with me here a little bit, I'm trying to be as accurate as possible, but you have to, it's
Well,
not that
it's
easy.
yeah, and it's still fiction. You're still writing a
Correct.
fiction book.
Correct.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. None of these people are real.
Yeah.
They're not based on anybody actually, because I don't know the local law enforcement up
Hmm.
there. There is a town police department. They're kind of on the small side. I've never really spoke to anybody there. I should give them copies of the books though, and get an endorsement for the third one now.
Yeah. There you go.
But so that's been the reaction out of that. And then the other reaction is guys from my job who read the book and are like, hey, is this based on this person or is that based on that? And then one of my field training officers, there's the first scene in the book describes vehicle stop that Mike does, but from the perspective of the person he's stopping, and he's watching everything kind of unfold. And one of the early things he does is Mike gets out of the car and he closes the door, but he closes the door, like he gets it to right before it locks, and then he pushes it quietly closed. And this guy, when we were first working together, I maybe had a week and a half on the road. We did a vehicle stop, and I got out the passenger side and I slammed that door, and I thought he was going to strangle me right there. He's like, "Don't ever, God, do it!" Like, and to this day he still works, he still works for the office. He's a good friend, but he busts my chops every day. I mean, it doesn't matter that I'm the boss of his boss now. He'll still bust my chops every day about it, and I let him. But he read that book, and he read that over Christmas last year, and he goes, huh, where did you get that from? I'm
Yeah.
like,
Where
yeah.
did you learn that? I
So,
love it.
but so it's just those little kind of inside things and inside jokes that we have.
Yeah.
Just the way, the insular nature of law enforcement is, you can bust on each other and treat each other like crap. Kind of like what's the movie from the 70s? Only we get to pick on our pledges.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one
Yeah.
else does. This is Animal House.
Yeah. There you
Only
go.
we get to rip on our pledges. And there's hazing that goes on, and I've seen that not only in law enforcement, but like when I first started working when I was 16 years old, working for the company my dad worked for. The guys would bust my chops.
Right.
Or my partner, I based the character Hugh Bell on. His thing was, he goes, if we didn't pick on you, you can tell you we like you because we're picking on you.
Yeah, no, for sure.
If
I've
we
been
didn't like
told
you, we
that.
wouldn't talk to you.
Exactly. That's what I've been told. I go, hey, as long as people are messing with you and picking on you, then you know you're okay. If they're not talking to you, then you might, then you got problems. So I've
Exactly.
heard that. I've
Yeah.
heard that for sure.
So there, so there's a lot of that, and I just wanted to make these law enforcement characters as real as possible. Also, I get a lot of compliments and a lot of things that the Catskills are kind of the main character in a lot of this.
Well, I love that. You've had, all those years in the Catskills. You've got a place there now. It means a lot to you, and it shows from your book. The thing I like too is I can tell these characters come to life for you. I mean, you're talking about these as if they're like real, and I know you've built this. I'm sitting here thinking these are, it almost feels like real people. I know it's fiction, but I think that's what you've done. I'm excited to read your books because I think that's what I'm going to get is I'm going to get to know these characters.
Yeah, that's a lot of it, and and now I had the first book, and I wanted to kind of build the story and build the basic the basic world, but I didn't want to broaden it too much and have too many things going on.
Yeah.
I did a pretty decent job knowing I wanted to put it out to a trilogy. I did a pretty decent job in the first book of establishing who matters and who's connected to who without kind of broadening the depth, and just kind of created, you know, this guy's the father of this guy, and this guy's grandfather is this guy, and these guys all knew Mike's dad, and these people over here knew Mike's dad from this, and how they're all interconnected. And then in the second book, which is coming at the end of the month, I kind of blow a lot of that up and I make it more complicated. So, and then hopefully in the third book, I can actually resolve some of these things, but we'll see how that goes. We haven't written that one yet.
Sure. Well, okay. So here we got to know. So you've got a book out. You've got one coming out, part of the trilogy. What's the names? Where can people find these books?
All
How
right.
do we do this?
So if you'll bear with me a second here.
Yeah, no problem.
So the first book is called Our Lady of the Overlook. That's what the cover looks like. If you buy it from my website, I will sign it. I will personalize it. I'll do all those wonderful things and I'll send it out to you. If you want a little bit of an easier thing, it is available on Amazon, both print and ebook. And it is available on Kindle Unlimited for, it's a big thing I've learned marketing and stuff. There are people that, I only want, I only want a hardback. I only want a paperback. I only do ebooks. I only do audiobooks. Like I'm an audiobook consumer. I have a 45-minute commute. So podcasts and audiobooks are how I get through my day, or through my commute, that is. So audiobooks forthcoming, hopefully soon. I'm trying to line up a narrator. I kind of, cart before the horse on some of this stuff. But by the time the third book comes out, I want to have all three prepared to go on Audible. So that's where you can get that you can order that there. Second book, this is the proof copy. You can see the little
Nice.
not for sale, but it's called Quiet Whispers of the Overlook. It is due out on Amazon on August 29th. Currently running a pre-order through August 1st, which by the time everybody gets to listen to this, it'll be over. That'll be for sale probably by the time this episode gets out there. Going to work on probably some kind of deal where, if you want to buy both at the same time, we can do that. For, two for,
Sure.
like
Yeah.
they're usually $20, maybe we'll do two for 35 or something like that. And, save some folks some money. But yeah, that's where you can find me. Website, didn't
Yeah,
say
there we
that.
go.
Website is www.rlcarpentierwriter.com.
Carpentier writer. Okay.
Yeah. rlcarpentierwriter.com. You can also sign up. You can sign up for my newsletter there. I am a pretty faithful newsletter writer. I get it out every week. Getting a little less in depth because there's just I just feel like I'm repeating myself. But every week I get the newsletter out there, and I got some faithful readers on that. Then Facebook, I post semi regularly on there, and whatever carries from Facebook over to Instagram, but I'm not a huge social media guy. It's
Oh, no
hard.
worries.
It's hard to keep up on that. And again, my job's become a lot more complicated in the last couple months too. So which monopolized a lot of that time. On top of I'm independent, self-published, so I'm doing my own marketing. I'm
For
doing
sure.
everything. So trying to juggle a bunch of stuff, and also being a dad, husband, cleaning house, and maintaining things too. While
Yeah.
it's
There's a
tough.
lot. There's a lot going on. We have a lot going on, that's for sure. I love the fact that you did this. I think this is a great accomplishment. I'm excited to look into these books as well and kind of read your story and see what's going on with that. I will put this in the show notes as well. I'll put the link to the website and everything so people can kind of go there and check it out and order the book from you. I think that's the way to go. I mean, I want to get a signed copy. I think that's the way to do it. Order from your website.
Yeah, I agree, and keep Jeff Bezos out of it for a little bit. He's got plenty of money,
He's good.
but
Yeah, he's
yeah,
good.
um, but again, as much as I want to develop this business and have a post law enforcement career as a writer and make money and stuff like that, it's also about getting the story out there, getting readers, hearing what people have to say, having that one-on-one. I make a lot of sales. I do in New York. We have, especially my area, we have a lot of what are called street fairs, where you just you set up a table and a tent and you sell stuff. And I've gotten to the point, I've done 3 of them since the beginning of June, and I can read a reader from a mile away. Like, people walk by me. I think it took me 2.5 hours to make my first sale at the last one, but I'm watching people walk by. I'm like, nope, those aren't it. Those aren't it. Then I saw somebody, and they walked by, and they were looking kind of out of the corner of their eye, and then they walked down the street a little bit, and then I saw them come back, and again I got the eyeball, and she was talking to her boyfriend or whatever, and third pass they kind of stopped, and then they walked up. I'm like, oh yeah, I got you. But it was great because I talked to him and I said, hey, and again, the more that I do this, I'm learning how to market myself and talk to people. And but I love that connection. Again, that's why I like my newsletter so much.
Yeah.
And I'm really starting to get a lot of good communication back and forth with some of the people who read my newsletter. They'll, I'll start asking questions and they'll respond back. We recently had to put down our dog that we had for 16 years. I missed the newsletter that week. I couldn't, it happened on a Sunday, and I just, everything going on, I didn't get my newsletter out. So this past week, I kind of wrote an apology. I'm like, say, sorry, I missed it, but this is the reason. And I've been flooded with condolences, which is just nice. People just well wishing, and just kind of having that back and forth. I'm going for that authenticity. That's what I write about. I'm writing about a real place. I'm writing about real-ish people. The circumstances may be fake, but it's based on a lot of reality. So there's
Yeah.
that authenticity, and
Yeah.
I like to have a relationship with the readers also, and I love getting feedback and reviews. And as long as you're constructive, you can say negative things, but just be constructive. Don't be mean.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I'm with you there. 100%. Well, this has been fascinating. I'm really excited to get involved in the books myself. Appreciate your story. Appreciate what you did, going to the Catskills and how that's kind of, that's the base now for your novels, which is really cool.
Yep. And even some of the future ideas that I've had, I'm working a little bit more historical stuff because my wife really loves the history of everything up there. She's reading about is they had a lot of vacationing places up there. They had competing mountain houses and hotels and things like that throughout the 1800s and the early 1900s, which is fascinating. I'm like, that would be that'll be a rich field to go to for some stories, I bet too. So I'm just fascinated with that. So Stephen King has Derry, and if I have the Catskills, that's great too.
Yeah, I love it. So my final question to you, we've been chatting for quite a while. My final question to you, this is a question I like to ask everybody because Journey with Jake is an adventure podcast. So for you, Rodney, what does adventure mean to you?
I think that you should try to have an adventure throughout your entire life. There should be, life should be an adventure, and you have the ups and downs, and you have things that you want to accomplish, and constantly move forward in life, and you can have little things, again, like I had, bookended tragedies while climbing the Catskills, and just kind of really seeing the poetry and the things in life that exist. And if you're not trying to do something new or something different or something better, maybe not every day, but in snippets of your life, that's what makes life worth doing. And so I think your entire life should try to be an adventure and figure out what if you finish one thing, what's the next thing.
Love it. Rodney, thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake.
Thank you for having me, Jake. Really appreciate it. I had a great time.
A heartfelt thank you to Rodney Carpentier for opening up and sharing his path through the wild beauty of the Catskills, the challenges of life in law enforcement, and the creativity that bloomed into his mystery novel. His journey is a reminder that the peaks we climb are often as much within us as they are before us. If you'd like to step further into Rodney's world, visit rlcarpentierwriter.com to learn more and grab a copy of his book. And to you, my friends, thank you for listening, for sharing in these stories, and for keeping the spirit of adventure alive. If this conversation moved you, please share Journey with Jake with someone who could use a little inspiration today. Next week, we'll set sail, literally, with Allison Guiche, who's traveling the world by sea with her husband, weaving her experiences into her writing. It's a voyage you won't want to miss. Until then, just remember, it's not always about the destination, as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.